Topping today's news, 2 men shot dead this morning as the country continues to suffer the effects of gun violence. The Minister of Works finds himself in a sticky situation regarding the BPL fuel hedge debate. More details on an aggressive road paving project. And how would you like to know which islands generate the most conch and lobster? We may have that answer for you in an upcoming report. Good evening, Bahamas. I'm Jarino Saunders. This is your JCN Evening News. It's a pleasure to have you join us. 2 young men brazenly gunned down in broad daylight in a shooting this morning, which leaves police investigating a double homicide here on New Providence. The bodies of the men, one in his late teens and the other in his early 20s, lay lifeless in pools of blood on Ferguson Road when JCN News team arrived on the scene. The bodies were riddled with gunshots by high-powered weapons, according to Police Press Liaison Officer Chief Superintendent Chrislyn Skippings. This latest double killing unfolded shortly after 8 a.m. in front of an orange apartment complex just off West Bay Street.
Our initial investigations thus far reveal that 2 males, the occupants of a gray Hyundai Touring, had recently pulled into the parking lot just here on Ferguson Way when 2 males exited a small white vehicle, both of whom were armed with weapons. They opened fire on the vehicle, hitting both males multiple times. Both of the men succumbed to their injuries on scene.
Revealing that one of the victims was in fact known to police and was out on bail for being in possession of a firearm. Consequently, he was outfitted with an ankle monitoring device. Now, as investigations are still early, police say they do not have a motive for these killings. With that, police make this appeal.
And we are appealing to members of the public who may have been in this area during that time, who may have any information that can assist us with our investigations. We're asking you to reach out to our officers at the Criminal Investigation Department. You can reach them at 502-9991 or 2 and give us the information that we need so that we'll be able to bring this matter to a close within a relatively short period of time. Again, I also make an appeal to parents, family members who know of persons who may have weapons. We're asking you to contact your police department. You can remain anonymous. Additionally, you can reach out to Crime Stoppers at 328-TIPS. Crime Stoppers is anonymous. It is answered between Canada and the US of A, and so there's no need for you to fear that your identity will be revealed.
These latest killings push the country's homicide count for the year to 125, according to JCN's records. Again, police are actively investigating. After several weeks of denying that he had seen any correspondence from Bahamas Power and Light, BPL's executives, concerning the corporation's fuel hedge fund program, Works and Utilities Minister Alfred Sayers has admitted that he did receive details on the same in October of 2021. Minister Sayers on Thursday during a press conference at the Ministry of Works, when asked to respond to opposition leader Michael Pintard's accusations that he had misled the House of Assembly in denying receiving emails or requests for certain aspects of BPL's hedge to be executed, said he had received details of the company's fuel hedge program from BPL's executives, which he then passed on to the Financial Secretary, Simon Wilson. After being questioned by the opposition and reaching out to his permanent secretary for some kind of confirmation and receiving none, the minister says he took matters into his own hands.
When I went several weeks, I was in New York, and I took a day, and I brought my old iPad, and I went back personally and did a search, and I found that I did receive, I think it was on October 9th, I did receive an email with the attachments. It would have gone on to be sent on to the Financial Secretary, which is normal because they are the technical review in terms of financial clearance, because it was really to access a loan which is managed by the Ministry of Finance.
Add to that, he noted Mr. Wilson's rejection of the hedge fund, which he did not support, was then passed on to BPL. The power company tried their best to persuade the financial secretary.
When I found that email trail, the first opportunity I got was when I was in Parliament, and this was debating the Mental Health Act. The leader of the opposition made the allegation again. I could not sit there knowing that the first representation I had made was not correct. And as is my duty, I got up and I stated on the record of the House of Assembly that I had done a search of my email, and I had found the email of October 9th, I think it was 2021, and that the response of the financial secretary. And I stated it on the record because it was incumbent upon me to correct the previous statement that I had made.
Minister Sayers' comments follows the opposition leader's call for him to resign just last month, as he believes this administration's failure to execute BPL's head trades has left BPL customers exposed and resulting in high fuel costs that have been introduced. However, during the press conference, a number of projects aiming to reduce fuel costs were revealed to be underway by BPL CEO Siobhan Cambridge. BPL's CEO Cambridge says a number of fuel reducing initiatives are underway in New Providence and some family islands. Those initiatives include the introduction of renewable energy programs. These programs are in an effort to decrease the recent rise in fuel and relieve the impact on residents and business owners. Among new plans, the CEO also says residents should be on the lookout for a street lighting replacing project that will focus on replacement of over 30,000 street lights in New Providence with LED lights, a move that should reduce the consumption of street lights by some 20 to 30%. Over the course of the next 2 years, 2023 and 2024, the Ministry of Works and Utilities will undergo an aggressive road paving program, a permanent solution to road issues here on New Providence. Thousands of potholes have been a vexing issue for motorists this year. Senior engineer at the Ministry of Works, Francis Clark, says the program is set to come after years of pothole patching, with both public and private contractors working in tandem.
Supply chain issues with getting materials, both for asphalt and for even equipment, because you can, just like how we had issues, people have issues bringing cars and mechanical equipment, all of that impacts our timeline. Then you also have, again, when we could not do in close quarters, we had to reduce the amount of patching. And pothole patching is actually a very sensitive process, in the fact that if one thing impacts the entire process, you will end up getting more and more of a backlog. So the current issue that we're having now is actually from like months and months of increased rains. The rains in May earlier this year, when it inundated a lot of the island. That affects the base, especially when it's standing for more than 24 hours. And it in turn, because it weakens the undercarriage, the base, it causes issues with the top. Because again, if asphalt is a fabric, if the base underneath the fabric is compromised, then it's easier for potholes to form.
Joe Farrington Road and East Street South are expected to be among those major roads. As for what the budget will look like for this extensive project, Mr. Clark says the information is currently being compiled, with inspectors doing reports on each road set to be revamped. Family Island engineers David Cox also commenting on whether similar action will be taken on the Family Islands.
We have listed over 50 roads on that program. Most of them are arterial roadways, which are the main roadways that carry the higher volumes of traffic at higher speeds. But we also haven't forgotten some of the community roads.
But until that road paving program gets off the ground, Works and Utilities engineer Bahia Hepburn says teams are working to do what they can despite the challenges, including a backlog dating back to the start of the pandemic.
At the moment, we have some PPP programs, that's private-public partnership, financing reconstruction plans to work in Exuma, Cat Island, and Eleuthera. Those are still, work have already started in Exuma, but for the other islands, those are still in negotiation stage. In terms of Abaco, we don't have a extensive plan to do any major works in Abaco at the moment. We're just doing mainly maintenance.
She says in their efforts, the ministry has patched almost 2,000 locations in just the past 5 months. And while the ministry does apologize for the inconvenience, members of the team are out on the field working to solve these issues 7 days a week. And finally, in this segment, in part one of a report on mangroves, the ecosystems in the Bahamas, we heard from a team of scientists from the Perry Institute for Marine Science on the health and value of the mangroves as they grade each island, which was done for the first time in the Bahamas' history. In this next report, which is part two of the findings on mangroves, we learned just how well the mangroves are functioning as habitats for various fish species. Like we mentioned in part one of this report, for the first time in the Bahamas' history, we now have a report card, so to speak, on the extent and value of mangroves that exist across the country. Again, under the guidance of Executive Director Dr. Craig Dalgram, the Perry Institute for Marine Science recently released a first-of-its-kind report on the health of the Bahamas' valuable mangrove ecosystems. In the first report, we focused on the monetary and scientific value of the mangroves and their ability to remove carbon dioxide from the air in relation to the fight against global warming. But in this report, Dr. Dalgram lets us know to what extent mangroves are functioning properly as habitats for the various fish species that we love so much here in the Bahamas.
As it relates to mangrove function as a nursery for young fish and fishery species, there's more good news there as well. Overall, the fish nursery index rating for the Bahamian mangroves was high. Again, about 42% of sites rated as medium and 46% as high or very high. So the mangroves are serving an important fishery nursery function in the Bahamas.
Research also shows that the number and variety of fish species using the mangroves as an habitat directly connects to another vital underwater ecosystem.
Fish diversity was also higher in mangroves that were closer to coral reefs. Approximately 42% of sites had a species richness score of high or very high. Places that didn't score as high were farther away from those reefs.
Again, Dr. Dalgram, an expert in tropical marine ecosystems, led the local and international team of scientists as they assessed and placed value on the various mangrove habitats around the country, with most Family Islands receiving a B, New Providence receiving a D. If you are wondering where in the Bahamas much of the conch and lobster develop, you may want to hear what Dr. Dalgram has to say in this next clip.
It's also noteworthy that overall mangroves had a score of medium for the diversity of fish living in them. But that score varied again from site to site. 42% of the sites had a score of high or very high. And in places like the Berry Islands, there were 67% of mangrove sites had a score of very high for the diversity of the fish living there. Fish communities in Grand Bahama, Eleuthera, and Exuma were also very diverse and rated as high overall. We looked at some of the important fishery species. Queen conch, which generates about $7 million annually for the Bahamian economy, was most abundant in mangroves in the Exumas, while spiny lobster, a cornerstone of the Bahamian economy that employs about 9,000 fishers, were most plentiful in the mangroves in Grand Bahama.
The Bahamas is second in the region only to Cuba when it comes to the vast mangrove ecosystems, with 57% of those mangroves on Andros. In the first report, we ended by talking about some of the adverse effects humans and major hurricanes have had on mangroves. In our third and final report, we will take a look at what scientists from the Perry Institute for Marine Science think is the best way to go about restoring damaged mangrove ecosystems. We'll take a break here. We'll be right back after these commercials.